Hey everyone, welcome to the Creative Life, and I'm your host Chris Dices, and we have guests with us, Mr. Mang,
Mr. Mang, insert name.
Mr. Insert Name, who's here for our second guest, first time appearance on, I think this is lucky 13th podcast or something.
Oh, it had to be. It's got to be something metal when I'm involved.
Yeah.
It's
That's
not Friday, though. Not Friday.
Not Friday, not. Just one day off. Are we? I don't know.
Thursday today.
I know what year it is.
Yeah, well, you're doing better than me. I just know that it's a Thursday and I'm here.
Yeah, so we're living in the year after the end of the world, and we're here to talk about video game preservation.
Yes.
Because that was in the news, I think a month ago.
Yeah, about that. What was the situation there?
It was Sony's decision to shut down the Vita store and the PS3 store, so you can't buy anything from the store anymore. And they didn't tell a couple of devs that were working on a Vita game.
Oh dear.
And a lot of people were worried about not being able to buy from the shop.
To be honest, I'm shocked that they're still making games for Vita to start with, because while I personally loved it, the uptake just wasn't there. You know, people. I'm assuming it came down to price and a lack of marketing, because the original PSP was a success, but no one seemed to get into the Vita, which is a damn shame because there were so many great games.
Well, yeah. Well, they did the maths on what the games would be lost, and I think it's 139 games.
Yeah.
That you won't be able to get in more, exclusives on PS3 and Vita.
Yeah, yeah.
PS Store, I think, might be probably shut down by now.
Yeah, so the process for getting those games onto the Vita was you'd log in on your console, or there were other methods, but most of it was for the average user. We all had a PS3 or a PS4. You'd go on there, you'd download your game, you'd plug in your Vita and transfer it across. Saved you a lot of time and effort instead of just using the Vita itself.
Mm-hmm.
So now that they're deprecating the old systems, we've moved on to PS5, they're shutting down the PS3, the Vita, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, there's it's the standard end of life process, and they had been warning us for quite a while, but yeah, evidently they did not do their due diligence in notifying developers.
Well, yeah, which is wasn't too great by Sony. I was a bit surprised about. I think it's shutting down in the next 3 months or 4 months, or not that long.
Yeah.
That they'll be sort of getting rid of that. But Nintendo in the past has done it. They shut down the Wii shop. People were upset about that.
Yeah.
I think the DS store was pulled down too. But the Wii U shop is still up after a decade.
The Wii U.
After eight years now.
It's an oversized Vita, and you know it.
So yeah, well, funny enough, they basically have like ported nearly every main Nintendo game to the Switch, and
Yeah, they have
gone on to do well. But it's interesting that there is you can do PS4 games on the PS5.
Yeah,
The other generations you can't. Where Microsoft is the only one that actually really puts in the effort with their Game Pass, which has been really good, and backwards compatible.
Yeah, well, as we've been discussing earlier, in my personal opinion, as far as software side of things goes, Microsoft have always had the advantage there. They are a software company. They dabble in hardware, but they're software focused, and I think that they've made a lot of smart moves now this generation. After completely screwing up the last one, they've made a lot of smart moves on the software side. Yeah, backwards compatibility just straight out of the box, it works. That's brilliant. Whereas on the Sony side of things, 99.9% of games are compatible, but you don't have that full optimization. From a hardware perspective, as far as I can remember, they've effectively split it off so that you're effectively running in an emulator instead of running it native. That means that while it'll work, it's not optimized. You might encounter some crashes, you might encounter some glitches, and some functionality might be lost. Not ideal, but a hell of a lot better than we got with the PS4, which just wasn't backwards compatible. The launch model of the PS3 was backwards compatible, but they scrapped that because that's one of the biggest reasons why it was so damn expensive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Microsoft definitely got an edge.
Well, I think that's the big advantage compared to, well, you look at Nintendo and really all they've done is put a few NES and Super Nintendo games on the Switch.
Oh,
They ported everything from the Wii U to the Switch because that made sense and it has worked out for them. They've got the gold mine of games, but they've never really done the whole Netflix come and subscribe to all of our games.
Because Microsoft's really pushing this digital platform now with games on demand, streaming services. Who was it that tried to launch a game streaming service last?
It was Google.
Yeah.
Google Stadia, which
Yeah, and it just did not work.
It's still around.
Yeah,
but no one cares,
it was a
and no one's
massive
sort
flop.
of
Massive flop.
yeah.
Microsoft, on the other hand, have taken it and run with it. Sony have been doing something similar for quite a while now with PlayStation Now, but I suppose I've probably got a different perspective because in Australia, at the time that PlayStation Now came out, it wasn't viable for Australian internet. We have garbage internet.
Well, that's the thing. That's an issue probably why Google Stadia wouldn't work. But I don't know, Microsoft's xCloud.
Yeah.
They might probably be the clueiest ones to work it out.
Yeah, well, they already have the pre-existing infrastructure, and that's the biggest component of these kind of streaming services. They've been at it for God knows how long. They know what they're doing, and they've got the services to back them up.
Absolutely. And I think with and it's weird, like, you know, I get the Sony for the Sony games and third party stuff, I get Nintendo for the exclusive, but Microsoft, I'm not too sure what the huge appeal is there apart from Game Pass, but I kind of feel like you could pick up an Xbox on the cheap and just have Game Pass each month and you have enough games to be happy with as that third console, you know. And I was a little worried about, you know, people doing Game Pass and people not buying those games.
Yeah.
But apparently the data shows that a lot of indie games get picked up well. If they play for a month or two on there and it leaves the shop and you have to buy it, they will actually fork it out.
Hell yeah. And
So-
the thing with indie games is that they're not like these overly bloated AAA titles where they're trying to make you play the same game for 6 months, you know. Indie games tend to be more concise experiences. They're cheap. They plug out your weekend. They're definitely on the rise, and if you can get it on a streaming service, even better.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. So that would be tempting to sort of do, or even Game Pass for PC users who are into that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
you know, they tend to also not be too hardware intensive, which opens up a far wider audience.
That is true.
As far as PC goes.
Well, yeah.
And having that crossover between your console games and your PC, with the way Xbox is working, you can play between the two different platforms.
With all that, yeah.
It's a convenience thing.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting with all three of them, you know, taking different routes. I mean, I'm not too sure. I mean, there was a comment that the Sony CEO made, and I don't know what game he was talking about because it just lost my mind. And he was at some event for this game. I don't know if it was Forenza, but it had like 4 entries in the game series.
Forza Motorsport, is that the one?
Could be. And he was at the event, and he said, "Oh, they had all the 4 different versions of the game." and I just sit there and I look at the two old ones and I go, why would anyone play that? It looks ugly.
Yeah.
That's his, and I think that might be an idea into why Sony just doesn't quite take it as seriously.
I think in terms of games that you're playing for nostalgia purposes, if you're on Sony consoles, then you tend to have to shell out for, you know, a remastered version, or, you know, in some way tweaked to run on the current console. You tend to pay more. But I think when we're talking about legacy games like that, the only people who are buying it are people who are invested in it. And they will pay.
Oh yeah.
Like me personally, I love Tekken 3 so damn much. Old school games like Zone of the Enders, the early Metal Gear games, and I did shell out to get playable copies. PS3 era. I spent a good amount of cash getting the original Metal Gears, the collection, you know, from back on PS1, and I think it was the original Metal Gear would have been Mega Drive, I think, possibly. Either that
Okay.
or and SNES. I know it hit a couple of different consoles, but yeah, I paid.
Yeah.
So I think they're not that concerned with the niche gamers.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense from a financial perspective unless people are gonna pay up, and they know that the niche gamers will pay up.
Well, yeah, that's true. Well, they can just do a remaster
Yeah,
and do it like that. That's probably what works for them as the brand.
yeah, they're probably making damn good money off it.
But yeah, it's going to be so there is a video game museum, I think, that does preserve games, physical copies and things like that, and consoles and things like that.
Yeah, well, we've got one in Australia. Can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's was it the National Sound and Film Archives, I believe.
Yeah.
They also do video games.
Yeah, I do. I've definitely heard of that. Definitely they do music and films and video games has been an addition.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting if there was some sort of more international body that would just, you know, it's kind of a requirement that you just give a copy to them, like the library.
That would be damn cool.
And it's just goes on lock and key and it's all right, and you know they can show it off.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. And from another, you know, angle, obviously we're not promoting it, but people have been producing mods and their own digital versions of these games for a long time.
Well, yes.
You run an emulator and you got the game.
Yep.
So I think there'll always be a push and a backup from the community to preserve these games.
Oh yeah, definitely in the internet age now.
Yeah, and
easy.
it'll have a very different focus than the market will, because it's always going to come down to who likes what, the individual, instead of what a corporation thinks.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that that's the sad thing about it. But I wonder how they could make it a bit more appealing. But maybe as consoles go on now, compatibility between the consoles, that might be. I think Nintendo has been trying to do that, saying yes, you'll be able to keep your account for further consoles in the future. They've been trying to. Yeah,
they've made an effort recently. Historically, they were kind of terrible at it, but they've definitely been making some strides of late.
So went with the NVIDIA chip, and they wanted to keep it to that, and so they can do the portable and the home stuff.
Yeah.
So it's worked out for them well so far, and you know with Sony they've been fine with PS4 and PS5, the same stuff they've been using? The same chip, the same.
Yeah, so they were working on the same architecture for a while. Most recently, they've changed track. It's been for the first time in some time, and they're effectively, again, I'm not an expert on this, but they've partitioned off within the hardware old architecture and new. So when you're running a game that's like a legacy game, you're actually using a different process altogether.
Okay.
They managed to package that into one unit, which is probably why it's so damn big. The PS5 is huge. And remember the PS3 that was backwards compatible was free and huge too.
Yeah,
that was a chunky boy.
Definitely the disc version of the PS5 is a chunky on its side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very tall. Very tall.
They are, yeah. So I guess they're packing a lot of stuff in. It was basically like mini computers now, I guess. With all the stuff they put in, technology and...
Yeah, I think as the generations have rolled on, consoles have become more and more similar to a desktop PC, especially lately in terms of form factor. They're still a lot more portable, they're still smaller, but in order to produce the results that they do, they've had to get larger, and they're starting to become a somewhat similar form factor. And last gen, there were all these problems with heating. So they've got a lot more space in them now to factor in for ventilation and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about video game preservation, what do you think the main points are, aside from I want to play it?
I think it would be for historical reasons, people's past works and that, preserving it, because especially consoles and rare like physical stuff. Some consoles didn't sell that much, like the Dreamcast and Wii U.
God, I love the Dreamcast. There was some great games on Dreamcast.
Yeah. And even the more obscure stuff that didn't even sell 5 million, or like the Virtual Boy, 500,000.
Yeah.
Even Sony. Sony's VRs have done alright. The 10, 15 million I've heard numbers they've sold.
Yeah, well, I had one. I really enjoyed the use I got out of it. It doesn't work quite as good for me as for other people, I think, because I got one dodgy eye. But I thought it was a good entryway, because it was so much cheaper than all the other VR stuff on the market, and it definitely wasn't the best, but it was affordable, accessible for the masses, and so it seemed to have pretty good uptake. Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Might get one day, or the new one that they've announced.
They're rolling out a new one. It'll be cool to see what sort of advancements they've made, and keeping in mind that VR, for the most part, was PC specific, and you needed to have a damn good PC that was capable of it to start with. Yeah. So now, with the previous VR units for Sony, they were very much limited by the hardware that was already available, and it was already several years old. Yeah. Times move quick.
Yeah, it's amazing how old tech is now.
Yeah.
It's now officially last gen, so 8 years old.
So I think the process with the old one was you had your PS4 and then you had a breakout box, and that was the original PS4.
Now there's only just one core.
Pro, and then a breakout box still. This new one will be able to take advantage of a lot more of that processing power for the new units, the PS5.
Well, yeah, which would be good. And I can't think of much else to chat about this topic, but I think video game preservation probably will get more important as the decades go on.
I'm going to disagree with you strongly there. We haven't discussed artistic value. We haven't discussed
the artistic value of it. We'll talk about that then.
No.
Get onto that.
See, this is the thing. The thing that I notice with
Mm-hmm.
so many, well, in any type of media, is that someone does it first and no one cares. No one
Yeah.
even looks at it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see these ideas recycled into a big hit much later down the track. Any brilliant movie director, their first film, no one cares about.
Yeah.
But down the line, everyone does. And a lot of people want to go back and see these earlier works so they can see the progression. Now, this might be from again, another niche thing. People who are massive cinephiles, people who are hardcore gamers. But it's great to see that progression along the way. And the people who are really invested will go back and look at those things.
Mm.
So if we're going to pick some kind of series, let's take Final Fantasy, one of the biggest series of all time.
Mm-hmm.
People play Final Fantasy 15, they go mental over it, and then they hear all the hype about Final Fantasy 7, they want to go back and they want to look. And then when you've got all of these remasters, remakes, reboots, so we've now got a new Final Fantasy 7 out. People are playing that, and then they might have completely missed that the first time around. They want to go back and see what that game was when it first came out. I think it's really important that we keep archiving these things because you never know what's going to be popular. 90% of the movies that are coming out these days are just recycles of stuff that came out in the 50s and 60s. How much did we lose because something wasn't popular at the time? No one cared at the time.
Probably a fair bit.
Yeah.
Depending on each sort of means of entertainment. I mean, there's it's a bit in video games.
Yeah.
Some innovations that weren't sort of caught the eye of people, and then someone else sort of took it and run with it.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's a fair bit of content around that. But yeah, I think definitely you've got to keep the originals and the remasters and remakes, and some of them are quite different to the original.
Well, one of the things that one of the reasons that something might not take off at the time is just because it doesn't sit within the current public consciousness well. Might have different attitudes, might have different ideas that people just can't relate to right now.
Mm-hmm.
But 20 years from now, those things might suddenly become very, very relevant. And it'd be a shame if people couldn't have access to it now, or 20 years from now. I just feel like we're losing a lot of ideas. The technical aspect, graphics and all that sort of stuff isn't really the important thing so much as the ideas behind ideas for mechanics and direction.
Because I know people who preserve these video games, there was a huge number, like 800 games from old Sony consoles, and a lot of them were demos.
Yeah.
And
Tech demos.
Tech demos could be quite different to the official release, and they might have had coding in there, which was interesting, and the hackers and the people sort of discover things about the game
Yeah,
that could have been in there or not.
That's part of the development process. Basically, you start off with shooting for the stars and going for your absolute ideal, and then things get scaled back over time. Content gets cut. A lot of that due to the restrictions of the available technology.
Yep.
But let's say we look at someone like George Lucas, who started off in the middle of a story. And I think he's been on the record saying that a lot of it was due to technical limitations.
Yeah.
Then later on he has to go and pad out the rest of the story, you know?
Yeah.
Once the technology becomes available. So similarly with a video game development process, a lot of stuff gets left on the cutting room floor, gets phased out because console, PC, whatever, just can't handle that scope. Well, if that code base still exists, it's going to be so much easier to remake it in the future once that technology is available. You look at Final Fantasy VIII. The Lost Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the reason that particular game never got a remaster or anything. They lost it, and
That's unbelievable.
people want to know, people want to play, but it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. The ideas are still relevant, and I think it's a shame that people can't pad out their experience with the full experience of that series.
I don't know if it was Square Enix or another company, but they had too lost the coding to the game of long ago, and
Yeah.
Nintendo was like, "Oh yeah, we've got it here
Yeah,
from like 20 years ago." So it seems like they do preserve it to a certain extent, the
Yeah.
coding of all their games.
it'd be great if there was bit more of a cross-platform effort with everyone in the industry involved to just keep things on record. I think the loss of anything is a shame. Trying to think, another example would be Bach. Didn't become popular until a good 100 years after his death, and now he's
He's big. He's pretty big now. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
different things for different times. Losing anything is just terrible. So you never know. But that's all I got to say about that.
All right.
Rant over.
Rant over. All right. I can't think of anything else to talk about too, but I'm sure that there will be plenty of topics to be talking about down the line. I think there's for those listeners out there, before we go, there's all these anniversaries that are video game anniversaries coming up.
Hell yeah.
So there is I'll do the Animal Crossing 20th.
Yeah.
To myself, there is also
You're a brave man bringing up Animal Crossing around me.
probably I say the biggest. I know there's Zelda 35th,
Yeah.
but I think one of the biggest ones would be the N64 turning 25, and the Wii 15. There is also Donkey Kong turns 40.
Hell
Life
yeah.
begins at 40.
Really?
From
That's
the
crazy.
original Donkey Kong Arcade to Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, all of his little spin-offs and
Yeah, still a good game. Still a good game.
still
the original.
worked
Fun.
out. And what other anniversaries were there? Bloody hell. Skyrim 10th birthday.
Yeah. And we've got about the half-hour anniversary of my last drink.
Well, yeah, and that will be part of it too. But yes, it will be interesting. Yoshi turns 32. That's another one.
Damn, Yoshi older than me?
Yeah, he's about the same age. Yeah.
Whoa.
Because and oddly enough, when I was born 2 days previously,
Yeah.
that's when Super Mario Brothers was released in America
Huh.
in the NES.
Was ready for you.
With Rob the Robot
Rob the Robot.
to convince them that it's not a video game console, it's just a toy because of the crash. But yeah, interesting stuff. But I think I shall wrap it up. Big thanks to Mr. Mang
Oh, thank
coming
you. sir.
on. It was all good, all good. And we shall see you next time on The Creative Life. We'll see you later on.